Welcome to Police K-9 Radio. Rich, what's going on?
Training's going on. We just got done training. We're going to talk about training. We'll be training tomorrow. We trained this morning, trained yesterday. It's kind of the key to all this K-9 stuff.
It's what we do.
It is what we do. Speaking of training, HITS is coming out to our side of the world. Last year it was on the East Coast. This year it's on the West Coast. Have you been to HITS?
I have been to HITS. Anybody's been to HITS.
HITS is where it's at. This year HITS is going to be August 15th through the 18th in Phoenix. That'll be a good time in Phoenix. There's a lot of things to do in and around the Phoenix area.
Yeah, here's the thing too. If you guys want to bring your wives or significant others, you can also head on up to Sedona. Go to Flagstaff, Scottsdale. A few tips for you. Yeah. I love Arizona.
Yeah, it's an awesome place to go. There's a lot to do there. If you haven't been to HITS, this year they have 35 instructors. They have 60 classes, 97 vendors, and $25,000 in free gifts. And I'll be honest, I'm not lucky anywhere. I always win something at HITS, and they're already usually a pretty decent prize that you're getting there. That's a lot of money to spend on prizes and vendors and whatnot. And there's cool stuff to see. I mean, every time you go there, you find something new, talk to people that are in the industry. It's a good place to go.
Well, here's the thing. We're always saying the handlers wind up with the dog that you deserve. And so this is one of those things that you need to get out of your training groups, and we encourage all our guys to do this. Hey, go to the conference, go to some different instructors, bring back what you liked, what you didn't like. It's always a worthwhile venture. So you've got to get outside your little training group, right? That's the only way you're going to get better. And so there's a lot of new changes in the industry, and there's going to be a lot of good instructors.
And that's the thing, with that many instructors, you can pick and choose kind of who you like, what works for you, what seems to work for your agency or your way of learning, and then go down that path further on after HITS is over.
Absolutely.
Speaking of training, I'm gonna plug you a little bit because I think it's necessary to see where we're coming from this. Gregg obviously owns DTAC K-9 and currently trains 23 agencies and has over 75 K-9 teams with handlers that he's working with. Any given week, he has at least 4 days of training that you're doing, and you're teaching young handlers and seasoned handlers how to work their dog and how to integrate with other patrol cops. That is kind of a common thread of how your day works. A lot of times, young handlers show up with a dog, they go to briefing, and they have to explain to the people that they're working with, the other officers that they're working with, or their bosses, how the dog is going to integrate into daily life on a patrol team, how things happen in a search, how things happen on a vehicle stop, all those things. And for a young handler, that might be a lot to communicate to a team that you're just coming to or that you've been around, but you're the new guy with the dog and everybody's looking to you for answers. So today we are going to give a 20-minute briefing video as to how to integrate with the dog, what the dog is used for, and how to work safely around the dog and effectively.
Yeah, this video is designed for any handler to be able to go back to their agency, boom, pull this up on YouTube, because if you're listening to us on the podcast, we're also going to be showing some visual aids during this, and it's really designed for you can take this to your patrol shift, play it, sit back, listen to it, make sure you're doing regular training, and as your shifts change, you need to continue doing training. It's not a one and done.
Right.
Like this should be something you do with every shift change, or if you guys get a new hire, show these types of videos with your new hires and make sure everybody's on the same page, because the success of the K-9 unit is dependent upon the success of their teammates and their patrol teams. That's what makes a successful unit. So it's a group endeavor for sure.
Absolutely. The 4 things that we're going to cover today and that you can cover in this briefing training, again, it should cover about 20 minutes. We're going to talk about cover officer responsibilities, arrest and control with the K-9 team, scent theory, and what to do if you get bit and you're not the suspect and that wasn't supposed to happen. So we're going to go over all those. First thing that we're going to cover is, why are we using dogs? What's the purpose and the benefit of using canines?
Yeah, so for those that aren't working a dog right now and you're watching this, why do we have these dogs? And there's numerous reasons we have them. Number one is to locate people and things. So it's their sense of smell. And there's been nothing that's been able to replicate their sense of smell in science. So we use the dog's ability to smell to help find things and to locate suspects. And in doing so, we wind up searching quicker, a lot of times giving directions of travel. And we'll get into different types of searches, whether we're tracking, trailing, or using air scent. And really one of the big advantages is the officer safety aspect, is it gives us some distance. So if the dog is in front searching and is located, is giving us a proximity alert, is giving us a body change and behavior change, and a handler can read, hey, we're getting close, then now we can formulate a plan. And so secondarily with the dog, once they've located, then we need to assess, is this the right use of force for us? And maybe at this point we pull back, we give additional announcements, maybe we use some other tactics, or maybe the dog is the appropriate use of force. But regardless, that's a decision we'll make after the dog is located.
Perfect. Next thing we're going to talk about is the cover officer responsibilities. So when we go out and we search with the K-9, obviously the K-9 handler is focusing on the dog to see what the dog's doing, trying to read when it's in odor or change of behavior is happening. What should other officers that are on scene during this search do while the K-9 handler is working with his dog?
So there's a few things. Number one, and I like to refer back to a movie, and it's Meet the Fockers or one of those where he's like, hey, Fokker, here's the circle, and here's you. You're outside the circle of trust, as he called it, right? Well, for us and for you as a cover officer, you want to be within the circle of trust. So if you think about it from the dog's point of view, when he's out searching, he's looking for somebody that's hiding that isn't moving along with the handler. In training, our cover officers are always with us. This is what makes it real difficult when we try to do a line search and you get your cover officers spread out as handlers. We need to really be careful because from the dog's perspective, it looks like people are hiding down behind a bush, which is what they've been taught to target. So for cover officers in this situation, stay with the handler, don't venture out. And there's a lot of reasons for not venturing out. Number one, once you venture out and you go around a shed and the dog now goes around the shed and suddenly there you are and the handler is separate and you've left that circle of trust, you now have become potentially a target. Number two, by you going outside of the circle of trust and looking over fences, right? The problem there is now you're contaminating the search, you're putting human odor in areas and the dog might come around that way after you've rejoined the group, show a little change of behavior. Now, is that your odor? Or is that the suspect's odor? So those are just a couple reasons. The other thing is if you are venturing out on your own and you see the suspect, here's where it gets a little tricky, right? You see the suspect, the dog hasn't located the suspect yet. Most cover officers in that situation start yelling, let me see your hands, let me see your hands. Now the dog is going to target potentially you because he doesn't see the suspect. You're now away from the handler and you're yelling. And so you have now become what we term the most interesting thing in the search. And if you've become the most interesting thing in the search, something's gone wrong. You don't want to be the most interesting thing in the search. So the other thing we're teaching cover officers is if we're searching and you're within the circle of trust like you're supposed to be, and you see the suspect before the dog has located him, and we'll talk about reasons why that would happen, but it can happen. And you see a leg sticking out from a tarp and the dog is over to the right and you see this over to the left, what we want you to do is we want you to go front sight. Now, this is really key. If you start yelling, let me see your hands, let me see your hands, at that point, the suspect knows that you found him. So if he's going to fight or run, it's going to be right then. Right. And we have not formulated a plan. The dog is still forward, right? Now you're yelling, the dog doesn't have a target. You could potentially be the target. The handler's got to now recall the dog. Everybody's moving quickly. Not everybody sees what you're seeing. They might not even see the suspect. They don't know what you're yelling at. So instead of creating this madness and this exigency, all we want you to do as a cover officer is point your gun towards them and say front sight. At that point in time, we can come up with a plan. Okay, hey, let's cover concealment. Let's give additional announcements. If I just gave an announcement, maybe I direct the dog that way, depending on what we have, the crime. It doesn't matter what you're going to decide to do. It's just now you have time to make that plan, right? Versus if you start yelling, there's no time to make a plan, and you potentially become the target of the dog. So
if you're a cover officer prior to doing some of these searches, is there something that a cover officer can do to help get the scene, whether you're doing a yard-to-yard or you're doing a building search, to help get the scene ready for the dog and the handler to search? Anything with homeowners or something like that? Yeah,
so, and, this goes into, if for most of us that are doing a yard-to-yard search, as a cover officer, you're going to be delegated certain tasks, and one of them might be, hey, can you contact the homeowner? Because we want to make sure that a few things. Number one, when you contact the homeowner, you're going to knock on the door, explain why you're there, explain you're going to be searching with a police dog. So there's some things that we want to know. Number one, does anybody have a lawful right to be in the backyard? AKA, is Uncle Ben sleeping in the backyard, yep. Right? So ascertain, does anybody have a lawful right to be in your backyard? Number two, do you have any dogs in the backyard? That's always good information for us, for handlers. Number 3, is there any hazards in the backyard? And then the 4th thing is we want to tell the homeowner, hey, do me a favor, close your windows and your slider and stay inside the residence. And so, because we don't want to start pushing back there and we kick the dog loose in the backyard and all of a sudden the homeowner steps out. And even with all these things, as a handler, I still...
You have to be ready for that.
I work my way up online to the corner of the house. We pie it. We take a look ourselves because we've actually gone back there and still we got a homeowner looking over the fence, just can't help themselves. Or maybe there's a language barrier and you're getting the guy going, yeah, okay, no, yeah. And then you go in there and he has no idea what you said.
Right.
But now you're going in his backyard, so he wants to see what's going on. So that's really the primary objective for the cover officers is you are to cover the handler. The other thing here is do not watch the dog. And it's natural. Like you're walking along and you're like, there's the dog up there searching. I want to see what he's doing. The handler's focused on the dog. As a cover officer, it's essential that you are now looking right and left, covering your areas of responsibility and up high because the handler's already focused on the dog. And here's the thing about dogs is they are leading us into an ambush. So we're using their nose. They've picked up a scent. Say we're trailing the suspect. The suspect gets to determine where this confrontation is potentially going to take place. And he may go up high or he may conceal himself in some bushes. And we're looking, if everybody's looking at the dog, we're going to miss that. And we could potentially go by the suspect again. When we hit the scent theory, we'll explain why. But just understand, you got to be aware of your areas of responsibility and you need to stay laser focused to that and don't watch the dog. Again, that's the handler's responsibility.
Okay, so now we find the suspect, the dog either finds the suspect or we have front sight and we're making contact with the suspect, whether it be with the dog apprehension or we're finding the suspect because of the dog's locating ability. What happens next during that arrest and control time?
Yeah, so different agencies handle these different ways. I will tell you how the majority of handlers handle it, and I will tell you how we train it. So essentially when the dog has engaged the suspect, he's on the bite, take direction from the K-9 handler, right? We are going to look for hands, waistband, and the immediate area is what the handler is going to be looking at and what you should be looking at. Don't get focused on the dog bite itself. We don't want to approach that suspect until it's safe to do. And so here's the thing we're looking for. Number 1, we're looking for compliance. And that's through the suspect's actions, demeanor, what he's saying. And we're looking to push forward and take the dog off the bite when it's safe to do so. So we need compliance and when it's safe to do so. That may, depending on the circumstances, that could be immediately or that could be waiting until the suspect is cuffed, depending on the number of officers, the want, if there's a weapon used, whatever it's going to be, the handler should dictate those types of things. So dog goes on the bite. Handler's going to then dictate to you, go ahead and grab his other arm or a arm. We're going to get a hold of the arms. Once we have a hold of the arms, then the handler's then going to remove the dog from the bite. He's going to go straight back, make a little berth for the handler so that he can move back, and then he's going to have physical and positive control of the dog. There are some other agencies that do a verbal release and the dog comes off. I like to make sure that the suspect is controlled, and if it's circumstances lead to that, then to me that's the best way to go, is once we have control of those arms. So, of course, again, the seriousness of the offense, the level of resistance, who we're searching for, all of these things are going to take precedence as to how we're going to handle this. But generally, just follow the instructions of the handler. If he says take an arm, go in, take an arm, and then once he removes the dog, then we complete the cuffing. So,
good. So now one of the things that's a little more mystical for people that are working with the dogs, we're going to talk about scent theory and how the dog is searching. And obviously sometimes the dog doesn't find what may look like an easy search for somebody who's on the scene. And sometimes they find stuff that you can't imagine how they found it, right? Let's talk about how the dogs work, in odor and what causes them to be effective and sometimes ineffective.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways the dogs are going to search. Number 1, we'll say it's an area search, and the dog is out searching, and he is looking for a scent cone. And we'll throw a picture up while we're talking about this of a scent cone. But essentially, the wind direction is coming from the right to the left. It will basically branch out into like a cone shape, and as the dog is searching, he hits that scent cone and then works it closer and closer and closer, kind of quartering back and forth until they get to the source of it, which would be the suspect. Well, the issue comes in if the wind is at our back and that cone is going the opposite direction that we are traveling. It is possible for that dog to get 10 feet in front of the suspect or go by the suspect 10 feet before I've got odor, and then work their way backwards. So the suspect could be on your left or on your right, depending on the wind direction. The other thing that makes it difficult is on a high find, the suspect's in a tree, odor does not just fall straight down. So odor is going to be pushed out the direction of the wind. So again, you could pass the suspect before the dog throws his head up high and goes, oh, there's odor falling on my head. And by that time, depending on how far the dog is ahead of you, you may be directly under the suspect, or you could be slightly in front of the suspect. He's at your back, up high, tactical advantage. That's why you got to maintain your areas of responsibility and don't look at the dog, because you can go by the suspect. So the other area is in trailing, and same thing applies. The dog could be trailing, miss a corner. Oh, wait a minute, I missed a corner, and now he's picking up the corner, and now the suspect again is on your immediate left or right. You've got to be aware of that. So you've got to pick up those areas of responsibility because the handler is focused on the dog. So some other things in scent theory that you need to be aware of. Number one, dogs don't clear rooms, people do. So just because a dog goes in a room and comes out, you take that room like the dog never went in there. There's things called inhaling doors, and odors getting sucked into a room or sucked into a closet, or the suspect puts himself under a bunch of clothes, and the odor in the room and the odor under the clothes is pretty similar, and the dog may have difficulty locating the suspect in that scenario. The other thing I see sometimes is bathrooms with the glass enclosures, and the suspect is in a tub, dog goes in and out. And handlers, I'm telling you, I do not let my cover officers search anything. I have my dog go in, go out. I go in with my dog, paws before boots through the entire search. I don't delegate cover. But if you choose to do so, that's your decision. Cover officers, my point is, just because a dog goes in and comes out doesn't mean the room is clear. And there's a saying, expect somebody to be there, be disappointed when they're not. So if you go in that room, dog goes in and goes out, and you open that closet, I'm already out of that fatal funnel. I'm opening it like I know he's in there, and I'm prepared for them to be there. So versus opening it, oh shit, somebody's there, right? We talked about OODA loop, observe, orientate, decide, act. Well, he's in your OODA loop if now you open the door and you didn't think somebody was going to be there, and now you've got a couple seconds to ingest that and decide what you're going to do. So already have a plan, open it, be prepared. Hands, waistband, immediate area, that's what you need to be clearing.
The one thing we didn't talk about on scent theory, can you just talk a little bit about heat and what that might do with odor if a dog is, searching a building per se?
Sure, and so that's the thing. So, we search as humans, we're using our eyes, so we're looking. Dogs are just processing things through their nose. Number one, their eyesight is not great. So basically, when they go into a room, they're just using their nose, and we've seen it. I like to compare it to, like, again, another movie reference is Jurassic Park, right? Where they're hiding from the T-Rex, and they're like, whatever you do, don't move. And they're like this, and then somebody sneezes or they move, and it picks up, the T-Rex picks up the movement. Your dogs are exactly the same thing in nature. They're ready for that rabbit to take off running. Boom, they pick up movement. So when our dogs go into a room, if somebody is sitting there and they're behind something and they're not moving, it's hard for the dogs to pick up that visual, right? So the other thing is when they go in there and they're using their nose, depending on what the heat's doing and what the air current's doing, they could be in one side of the room. The odor could be picked up and thrown into another corner. And we've seen it time after time. The dog goes in that corner, he's barking. There's nobody there. Suspect's on the other side of the room. So here's the thing that you need to think about. Dogs don't search for people. What do they search for? They search for the odor of people. And that may be in different spots than the actual person. Again, a high find, somebody's on a rack inside a building, super difficult. It could be hitting on the opposite wall. We don't know that. That's why, as we rely on our cover officers to maintain their area of responsibility, keep looking high, keep looking left and right, don't look at the dog.
Perfect. So now you didn't listen to the officer or the K-9 officer when he gave the briefing, and you've gone rogue on your search. You go deep in a building, you hit the wraparound, you're now coming towards the K-9. K-9's going downrange, sees you, and you get bit by the dog. What should a cover officer do should he be in that situation where they get bit by the dog?
Yeah, so now you're getting bit by the dog. Number one, do not shoot the dog. I repeat, do not shoot the dog. Okay, I've been bit a dozen times. I'm here to speak about it. The dog is it's a psychological impact, and if you can just remain calm, dog goes on the bite, and you tell the officer, you relay to the officer, I'm getting bit. He's got me. Then the cover officer, the handler is then going to move up, and he's going to remove the dog. Some things that you can do to ensure that the damage is minimal is when the dog goes on the bite, I grab the dog and just keep him still right where he's at. You're going to feel some compression. Later on, it's going to be a little bit, could be a little painful afterwards. But during that time, dog goes on the bite, grab him in, lock him in. The less thrashing and pulling, then the less amount of damage occurs to you. So grab him, pull him in. Don't try to escape. Don't start to hit the dog. It's just going to encourage the dog to continue to engage, and then let the handler come up, and then remove the dog. So be in that mindset of if the dog bites you, just remain calm, notify the handler, keep them from thrashing, and let the handler remove the dog.
Yeah. Try not to go rogue on a search. Don't go out and do your own thing. You kind of create your own problems there. We're about at the end of that 20-minute period. We're going to do a recap of everything that we went over, the most important things, and this will be the end of your briefing training.
Yeah, two quick things. Number one, suspect dogs. We are relying on our cover officers to handle that situation. One of the things, if you think there's going to be a suspect dog in the yard or you're going to encounter a suspect dog on the search, my recommendation is a fire extinguisher. They work extremely well, and you don't have to have exact targeting as the dog's coming in to engage the K-9. But as a handler, we cannot handle our dog and then handle the suspect dog. So I always tell my cover officers, I'm going to pull back, and I expect you guys to get in front, and then whether that's taser, whether that's OC, whether that's a fire extinguisher, or if you have to use lethal force, then that needs to be a decision made by cover officers. The other thing is in pursuits, K-9 is number one in the pursuit. And if we're going to deploy the dog, as cover officers, I know we have that prey drive instinct as well, whereas a cover officer, you want to run after the suspect. If you know the dog's going to be deployed, try not to do that. Start thinking containment, start thinking perimeter. If you are on a perimeter, some things we want you to do is get to your perimeter spot, voice it, make sure K-9 knows where you're at, turn on your overheads. We want to force that suspect to go to ground, and then get out of your vehicle. Do not sit in your patrol car. You're a sitting duck. So, and then as the K-9 handler's directing his search, they're going to see you, the overhead lights, you're outside your vehicle, we'll expect you to be outside your vehicle. And then the other thing to do is when the handler makes his announcements, it's incumbent upon the perimeter officers to get on the radio and go, hey, I heard the announcement over here. And if every perimeter officer has done that, then we know that the suspect should have heard the announcements, and then that gives them the opportunity for peaceful surrender, and then it's also could potentially be a defense for them later on saying they didn't know their dog was there. But if every perimeter officer has heard it, then it makes it a little more difficult for them to make that claim.
Anything else that we need to cover?
I think that's going to do it, but let's do our recap here. So the key here is communication. Communicate with your handler. Handlers, communicate with your cover officers. Don't be the most interesting thing in the search. So there's a couple things that I want you guys to get as a cover officer from this whole talk right here. And if you get only two things, number one, don't be the most interesting thing in the search. Do not start yelling. If you see the suspect, say front sight. Let the handler know that there's a suspect there. Let your team know. Then you can formulate the plan. Don't start yelling, let me see your hands, let me see your hands. I'm telling you, if you do that, it creates that exigency and things start to deteriorate. Get time on your side. So don't be the most interesting thing on the search. If you see the suspect, address it as front sight. Stay within your area of responsibility and stay within that circle of trust.
Perfect. I think that covers everything. And feel free, handlers, as you watch this, you can steal this and make it your own. or you can just use this video and display it in your briefing and watch it as we communicate it to you. So hopefully this is something that you guys can use to learn from and to help your other officers on the scene learn from, so they can work safely with you and your dog.
Yeah. Hey, and if we've missed anything, reach out to us. We're always open to updating this. This is just, this is a starting point for your training. Again, we recommend you get out there and work with your patrol teams, maybe set up a mock search, go through an arrest, put somebody in a bite suit, get your cover officers used to moving in, grabbing that arm, or however you guys typically finish the arrest. And honestly, I don't care. As long as everybody's on the same page and your cover officers and the handlers are all on the same page, they know what to expect from each other.
And we've talked about this. This could be a half-hour discussion. This could be an hour discussion. This could be a full training, in a monthly training for other people in the department. This is meant to be a 20-minute briefing training.
That's it.
Okay.
Down and dirty.
In the meantime,
Train hard
and be safe.